Avatar Kyoshi is the strongest avatar we've seen in the franchise. From lifting giant boulders from the ocean floor, to possibly having one of the greatest bloodbending feats in freezing Yun's heart, all the way to creating entire islands, Avatar Kyoshi is definitely no joke. Her life spanning across 230 years just leaves you thinking, how did she live so long and who could have possibly killed her? Those are the questions we're going to be answering in today's video. Kyoshi's age is a bit of a funny one. Kyoshi living 230 years started off as a mathematical error. In the Kyoshi Warriors episode, Suki had a one-off statement where she's like, Kyoshi was born on this island 400 years ago. Given that Roku died at the age of 70 and the war's been going on for 100 years, Kyoshi had to live until 230. Now, the creators knew this was a mistake and they had to fix it somehow, and they didn't want to just retcon it because there's no fun in retconning things. So what they did is add in an explanation for this in the Rise of Kyoshi novel. There's going to be some light spoilers ahead for this novel and also the Reckoning of Roku novel. I won't reveal anything too significant, just some light spoilers here and there, but you've been warned. It's not like anyone reads the novels anyways. After Avatar Kyoshi discovered that she was the real Avatar and not Yun, her and Rangi were on the run from her rogue earthbending instructor. While on the run, they end up coming across a man named Lao Gi, also known as Taiguai the Immortal, a famed assassin said to be hundreds of years old. He's described in the book as an extremely old man with a white wispy beard, raggedy clothes, and long white hair. Based off one of the 8 immortals in Chinese mythology, if you're gonna introduce something like immortality into the franchise, this guy's the way to do it. In secrecy, Kyoshi meets up with Taiguai and begs him to train her, specifically to train her on how to kill people without her emotions getting in the way. He obliges and they end up training in the art of assassination and spirituality. It's heavily implied that she learned this technique and held the keys to immortality and used it to live as long as she did. But still, if she's immortal, how did she die? This is also surprisingly answered in the novels as well, but this time in the latest installment, The Reckoning of Roku. And this novel is where things get interesting and pretty much had me hooked from the start. One of the first things we learn in The Reckoning of Roku is that the Fire Nation had 3 people born on the same day, almost at the exact same time. Roku, his twin brother, and Sozin. Immediately hearing this information just leaves you thinking, if we know the last Avatar was immortal, and now the future Fire Lord was born on the same day as the current Avatar, is there any way the Fire Nation had something to do with her death? Not that something like that would be particularly easy to time, but at the end of the day, this is fiction. And in fiction, you can pretty much write your way out of anything. Kyoshi's age being a perfect example of that. You make a mathematical error, you don't want to retcon anything, you just have Kyoshi have an immortal instructor. Pretty much problem solved, right? Now, although we don't have any clear signs of foul play from the Fire Nation, I figured it'd be an interesting thing to bring up because you never really know where they're gonna take this franchise. However, there is another chapter in this book dedicated to Kyoshi's death titled Let Go. This chapter is told from the perspective of Kyoshi's last air nomad companion and current, at the time of this book, airbending instructor of Avatar Roku named Sister Disha. This conversation takes place after an intense battle where Roku channeled Kyoshi's energy to earthbend for the first time. This was a very intense battle with many casualties that really would have never happened if Roku would have listened to his airbending instructor. Sister Disha decides to sit down and tell him a story. She starts off by telling Roku that she and him were friends in their previous life, and Kyoshi was just as powerful as an avatar as the world believes. Immediately, this throws Roku off guard and he doesn't really know what to say, so he's just like, were you Avatar Kyoshi's companion? And she reveals to him that not only was she her companion, but she was also her last ever airbending companion. After hearing this news, naturally Roku questions her if she was there during the time of Kyoshi's passing, but she shook her head saying no, and that they parted ways a couple years prior. This leaves Roku even more curious and he asks her why this happened, and she tells him, you know, when you're on a flying bison, the people below you shrink smaller the higher you go until they eventually become specks that gradually fade away. Kyoshi had lived so long and became so powerful as an avatar that I believe she had lost perspective on the inherent value of individual lives. Don't get me wrong, you could study the entirety of human history and not find a single person who did as much good as she did for the world, but in her relentless pursuit of justice and peace, she seemed to hesitate less and less when determining whether the threat someone posed outweighed their right to live. She then goes on to describe their final mission together. After one mission, our last together, it turned out a Dao Fei leader in the Earth Kingdom we'd been pursuing was the son of a man she'd executed many years prior. Every terrible thing he and his group of outlaws had done had been for the sole purpose of drawing Avatar Kyoshi's attention, so he'd had the chance to face her himself. After she settled this matter, I pointed out how the man's life had been shaped by her decision to kill his father. I asked her to consider many of the fires we'd been running all over the world to put out might have been lit by her. I told her I feared what she was becoming, what she might have been if she lived another 100 years. Maybe I was wrong, but when I looked inward, that is what I felt to be true. Kyoshi didn't take this lightly, and it isn't exactly clear on how she reacted, other than it was so bad that Sister Disha had to leave and share her concerns with the Air Nomad Council. Eventually, word spread so far and no airbender was willing to assist Avatar Kyoshi anymore. After Roku hears this, he has to ask Disha one more time, I know you weren't there when she died, but do you know how she died? Roku starts thinking there's no way age could catch up to her since she's not only the oldest living avatar, but also the oldest living human. Sister Disha replied saying that she doesn't know exactly how Kyoshi died, but she had a pretty good theory, that Kyoshi realized that sometimes people see us more clearly than we see ourselves, and then Kyoshi simply let go. From the title of the chapter to the explanation given to Roku, Avatar Kyoshi just let go and stopped doing the immortality technique as she finally saw that the world needed a new avatar. Obviously, it's left open-ended enough to where if they wanted to write in some crazy ending for Kyoshi, the option's there, but for now, I'd say this is pretty much the concrete answer. Lore like this doesn't just get dropped for no reason. This is the answer. This is the best way you have someone like Kyoshi die. When you give a past character the immortality cheat code, there's not many ways you can do their ending, especially when you make the character as strong as Kyoshi is. This does set the precedence going forward that the avatar probably shouldn't live longer than, let's say, 100 years. Once you get up there in the 80s, 90s, 100s, people just get stuck in their old ways and there's really no changing their mind.